Hello and welcome to Your New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo. On today's show, we're joined by history professor at Caldwell University, Dr. Marie Mullaney, who will share stories of New Jersey's trailblazing women. We also meet Maplewood's Prato, who has created a community for IVF families. But first, at 21 years young, Cedar Grove native Sarah Taffet went into cardiac arrest on the softball field. She is telling her story through the American Heart Association of New Jersey as a heart ambassador for their Go Red for Women Luncheons. Joining us now is Sarah. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am very excited that you are here today, and I think it's so inspirational and amazing that you were using your story for so much good. Please tell us what happened on that softball field that day.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was October 3rd of 2021. I was playing a softball game. It was the second game of the day. I was up to bat and I hit the ball to first base. I was running, and as I was running, I got tagged in the chest. I kind of fell forward, didn't feel anything, just a little bit like the wind got knocked out of me. I remember looking up at my coach and being like, oh, dang it, like I got out. Started running off the field and I was like, wait, something doesn't feel right. I remember everything just kind of closing in on me, everything turning black. And I just remember losing all control of my body and being on the ground. Next thing I knew, I woke up. There were a few people over me. It felt like I was underwater. I was like, what happened? What happened? Can someone please tell me what happened? And I remember the athletic trainer who actually saved my life was like, your heart stopped. And I was like, my heart stopped? Like, how, what do you mean? How is that even possible? So I remember just being so confused and not knowing what happened. But essentially, in those 2.5 minutes, my heart stopped and they performed CPR on me, 2 rounds of CPR and a shock at the AED. And then I came back to life. Bridget Ward, she is the athletic trainer at Fordham University. She made sure there was an AED there that day, which I am forever grateful for. She was alongside my teammate's father, who was an anesthesiologist, and another teammate's father, who was a physician's assistant, and they all helped with CPR and the usage of the AED. And they found out later that this cardiac arrest was triggered by something called Al-Kappa. It's anomalous left coronary artery coming from the pulmonary artery. So essentially, the way my doctor described it is it's like a car driving with 3 wheels. It's extremely inefficient. It works, but it's bound to break down at some point. And that's essentially how my heart was working for 21 years of my life, which is kind of crazy because the Al-Kappa actually has a mortality rate of 90% after the age of 1. So I was a very lucky girl to have my cardiac arrest where it happened, with who it happened, and essentially finding this underlying condition.
How did the tag trigger the cardiac arrest?
Once it was tagged, there's something called commotio cordis, which is essentially what happened to me, but it was triggered by what I had prior. So that's kind of how that happened.
Getting the word out there about the importance of learning CPR, learning how to use a defibrillator, and that leads us to the conversation we're having today. You are going to be sharing your story across the Garden State. How did you become the keynote speaker and heart ambassador for the Go Red for Women Luncheons?
Yeah, so ever since my cardiac arrest and then my open heart surgery, I made it a mission to kind of use my platform, make people aware of these life-saving skills. Like before what happened to me, I really didn't think about CPR too much. Obviously, I knew it was important. I knew it saves lives, but I never knew anyone that it happened to and never really had like a passion for it. But ever since like my incident, I just knew I needed to be a part of the American Heart Association. I need to make sure people knew how easy it is to just save a life. And it takes 10 minutes to just learn these skills, and you never know when you're going to need it. So I really just made it my mission. And when they asked me to speak at this event, I was right away, yes, absolutely. I was honestly honored.
After you recovered from your open heart surgery, did you go back to the softball field?
Yes, that is the best part of the story. After my open heart surgery, 3 months later, I was back on the softball field playing. I remember making it a goal of mine. I didn't care how I got back on the field, whether it was pinch running, one at bat in the whole season. I knew that after this heart surgery, after this cardiac arrest, the fall that I had, the fall that I put my teammates through, I was getting back on that field, and I made it happen. I ended up playing mainly every game, and we ended up winning the conference tournament, which was a full circle moment for, I think, the entire team. It was just incredible.
Thank you for being such an inspiration and coming on here. And I'm actually emceeing those women's luncheons, so I cannot wait to meet you in person in May. Where can people learn more about you and American Heart Association in New Jersey?
Yeah, for me, I mean, feel free to follow me on Instagram, LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff about CPR and AD awareness. It's like a part of my life now. And American Heart Association, you can learn how to perform CPR videos. They have all the tools you need on the American Heart website. So definitely check it out. It is so easy to become a lifesaver. So I recommend everyone do that.
Sarah, thank you so much, and continued health and everything great in life always for you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me today.
Caldwell University professor Marie Mullaney joins us to discuss the trailblazing New Jersey women that help shape society as we know it, and the importance of keeping their legacies alive. Marie, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
Admittedly, I really didn't know the stories of the New Jersey women you are about to speak of today. Please educate our audience how these New Jersey trailblazers help shape society as we know it today.
If you were to ask me who is probably the most famous woman in New Jersey history in terms of what she did for women and who is a nationally known figure, it would have to be Lucy Stone. She was a nationally known figure for a variety of reasons. Certainly, she was interested in the vote. But when she moved to New Jersey, she lived in various spots, but she lived in Orange, New Jersey, and her house is no longer visible, but the place where she would have lived is visible from 280 East going towards Newark, if that means anything to you. So she wrote a nasty letter to the tax collector in Orange, and she said, I'm not going to pay my property taxes because I am not represented. So she used the no taxation without representation idea. And the tax collector came and basically took a lot of her belongings and put them on the front lawn of her house, including her daughter's baby carriage. And he had an auction of those pieces. Luckily, some of her neighbors had bought the pieces and retrieved them. But I just think that those are very courageous actions that she did. So after Lucy Stone, there's no question at all that we would have to focus on Alice Paul. Alice Paul was born here in New Jersey, and other than going to school various places, she lived all of her life in New Jersey, and she died only in 1977. Her home, Paulsdale, is now a training center for women's leadership. But what makes her so important is she really changed the way Americans protest. And Alice Paul had spent some time in England with the suffrage movement. And she came back to the United States after studying in England. And she said, let's have monster parades. Let's have women dressed in caps and gowns if they are college graduates. And let's have immigrant women dressed in their native costumes. And let's have African American women marching with us. And she did that in Washington in 1913. She did it the weekend right before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration. But her big claim to fame is in 1917, when we finally entered World War I, she started this system called Silent Sentinels. And she had women associated with her picket the White House. Now, we're used to people picketing the White House all the time. But in 1917, again, this was shocking. So Alice Paul's strategy was to focus not on a state-by-state campaign, but to go for a national amendment, to hold the party in the White House responsible, in that case, the Democratic Party, and to have these various protest movements and grandiose grandstands, if you will. And that is for what she is best known for. So she's really a nationally known figure. Rebecca Buffum Spring is really interesting too. She was another one of these well-educated, native-born women who were involved, began to be involved politically before the Civil War. Her big cause initially was abolition. So some of her friends, her suffragette, her women's rights friends, I should say, came. Her abolitionist friends came to Perth Amboy. And she also started a school there that was called Eagleswood, which was a very progressive school. It was a co-educational school. There was a station of the Underground Railroad there. Well, she was still living there when John Brown launched his famous raid on Harper's Ferry, thinking he would be able to launch a slave revolt in what was West Virginia at the time. And of course, he and his companions were arrested. And she did something amazingly shocking. Again, from her religious perspective, she went to visit him in prison, which was really a shocking thing to do because she was a solitary woman going there. He was a traitor from the viewpoint of public opinion in the United States. So she was a really, really interesting character. She lived to the age of 100. And Mabel Smith Douglas was herself very well educated. And she wanted a public women's college to exist in New Jersey. And she and this women's club of Jersey City brought the idea to the attention of the Board of Trustees at Rutgers, and they fought for it for quite some time. But the trustees of Rutgers came around by 1918, and it was originally called the New Jersey College for Women. She was involved in its founding, and she became its dean for decades, and ultimately in 1955, New Jersey College for Women became known as Douglas College. And at one time, it was the largest college for women in the United States. But I think, my point in pointing all of this out, you said yourself that you haven't heard of these women, but women's historians and historians have heard of them. It's more likely that they would have heard of them. But I like to say that we really shouldn't focus only on the big names. I started with Lucy Stone and I started with Alice Paul because they're certainly important to New Jersey history, but so are people like Rebecca Buffum Spring and Mabel Smith Douglas.
Marie, thank you for that history lesson. Like I said, I had no idea of the contributions of those amazing women, and I thank you for educating myself and our audience. So we're coming out of Women's History Month, and I know that you think women's history should be celebrated every day, not just in March. How do you bring women's history to the classroom day in and day out?
I teach about women in every one of my classes, everyone. And we have the same discussion and I talk about Women's History Month. We need more than a month. And I have to say that is why I love doing the research that I do, because in one way or another, my research can be integrated into whatever course I am teaching. So if I teach Western civilization, I'm sure to teach about women. If I teach basic American history, I talk about a lot of these women.
Marie, you speak so passionately about these trailblazing women, and you know what? You are one yourself. Tell us about how you got your start in teaching.
I knew I wanted to go to graduate school in history, and I liked the 19th century. But when I got to graduate school, this is the absolute truth. I said, I don't want to learn any more about Napoleon. I don't want to learn anything more about George Washington. And I actually went to Rutgers, and my first teaching job was at Douglas College, which I loved. And that's how I found out about Mabel Smith Douglas. And I had two really phenomenal women's history professors, and I wanted to go into women's history because it was something new and it was something different. Now here at Caldwell, I've been so fortunate. I've been able to teach so many different kinds of courses, which I absolutely love. And that's the beauty of being at a small liberal arts institution, because I'm not pigeonholed. I've taught so many different courses in my career, and it helps me keep my research up, but it keeps me on my toes in terms of having all these bits of trivia, if you want, or just fascinating facts that really engage the students in the classroom, because that's the whole point. We need to get students to love history, to know history, to feel part of any history class. They need to see themselves in the curriculum.
Marie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where can people find out more about Caldwell University?
www.caldwell.edu. You can look me up. You can see all the courses I teach and things I'm involved in. And we have a great history department. We have a great university. And we are indebted to the sisters every day who started this institution.
Marie, thank you so much for coming on here today.
Thank you so much. It was great. Thank you.
Prato of Maplewood is the host of Infertile AF podcast, co-founder of Fertility Rally, and author of the new children's book about IVF, Work of Art. Ali joins us now to share her journey into parenthood. Ali, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and your journey. I so admire you IVF mothers and just the work and tears and blood and sweat that you had to endure to get your prize at the end, which is your son. Please share your IVF journey and how it all came to be.
Yeah, so I had a secondary infertility journey. My daughter is 14 and she was not born through any assisted reproductive technology, just the old-fashioned way, as they say. And I didn't realize I had her when I was 34. And I didn't realize that, putting off trying to have a baby, I didn't know much about my fertility. So I didn't realize that it was going to be harder to have a baby as I got older. It seems so silly that I didn't know much about my fertility now, but we talk about this a lot on my podcast. The sex education that we all got growing up was like, it's really easy to get pregnant, don't get pregnant. So when I found myself having trouble having this second baby, I was in this whole new world that I knew nothing about. So I kind of dove in. I realized that what I had was called secondary infertility, and ended up going through, a reproductive endocrinologist after many losses, miscarriages, lots of heartache, lots of depression. It was a really, really hard couple of years between having my daughter and my son, but I did eventually do IVF to have him, and got very, very lucky because I only had one healthy embryo, and we were only going to do it one time. It was like our Hail Mary, as we called it. And thankfully, when we did it, it worked, and he's here today. So he's 8 years old, and he's the subject, and my daughter is in the book as well. But the book Work of Art is about me telling him in the very interesting way that he came into this world.
How does the book delve into that?
So can I show you the cover? So this is it. It's called Work of Art. So art, is the name for assisted reproductive technology. So kind of a play on words there, but it basically is, it's kind of something that happened in real life between Sonny and me. He overheard me talking about IVF to someone and said, he's an IVF baby. And later he was like, Mom, what were you saying about Ivy? What does that mean? So I said, do you want me to tell you tonight, before bed, what I was talking about? So it's a very palatable, since this is a children's book, I wanted to make it very palatable for kids. We don't get into the nitty gritty of the science of it all, but I do say that, he was created in a lab, which is true. And then, he was implanted into my belly and grew in my belly, which is also true. So that's kind of the extent of the science that we get into it. But the thing I like about, putting something like this out into the world is that I feel like families can use it as a jumping off point. So, if you do have a kid that was born through assisted reproductive technology, or friends, or, kids who are friends' kids, anybody in your world, and you kind of want to explain it to people, it's a really good place where you can read the book and then kind of delve into it deeper afterwards if you want to. I wanted to cover hard topics, and we do, like loss and secondary infertility is mentioned, and going to the doctor is mentioned. But, obviously this is a children's book, so we had to keep it a little bit on the lighter side and make it very colorful and fun. So that's what we came up with.
When you told your son that he was an IVF baby, what was the reaction?
He was like, what does that mean? Does it mean that I'm weird? And that's one of the lines in the book too. And I say, no, it means that you were born in a very cool way. And, we talk about kind of the science of it all. And he's like, kind of like a superhero. And I'm like, yeah, kind of. So, the point of this is to normalize the conversation around IVF and infertility. And, there's so many kids who have come into the world this way. Now, it's 1 in 6 couples are affected by infertility. So, I know there's a lot of kids he goes to school with, and I see same-sex parents, which I think is wonderful, or solo parents by choice. So, at behind the scenes, you have an inkling that all these people use some sort of ART to build their families. So I just wanted to normalize it and, make it something that kids growing up today don't think it's weird and don't think it's anything different. It's like there's lots of ways to build a family. And I think it's kind of cool that my daughter, came into the world in a totally different way than he did. So in our family, it's kind of like all ways to build a family are normal.
You have a podcast called Infertile AF, that name I love. What inspired you to start this?
I started that because I've been a journalist for, 2 decades plus. I worked in magazines for many, many years. I've always loved telling people's stories. And when I was going through this whole thing with secondary infertility, and like I said, the depression and the feeling so alone, I really didn't have a community of people that I could lean on or count on. And not many people were talking about this at the time. In Hollywood, it was like, oh, Halle Berry's having a baby at 46. But that was kind of the end of the story. We never heard how or why. And not to speculate, I don't know how she had her baby. But, I'm guessing that a lot of people who are older and in the public eye had some sort of help behind the scenes. And people are talking about it more now, thankfully. But anyway, at the time in 2019, not that many people were talking about this. And I was like, this is so wild. Like, what's the big deal? Let's just get these stories out there to help people feel less alone. So I launched the podcast, and the first episode was me telling my story, because I thought, if I'm going to ask people to, be raw and real and not cute all the time, like, I need to be the one that does it first. So I did my story as episode 1. My husband actually came on for episode 100, which was really interesting, because even though, we were going through it together, he had a totally different version of the story. He had a totally different experience than I did. So it was kind of cool to listen to both of those. We had to have a few drinks before we recorded that one, to be honest with you, because I was nervous. We went through a lot together. But anyway, I've had, a lot of people on the show who are celebrities, and then just, regular people I've met in the fertility community. So, I also have I co-founded a community called Fertility Rally, and we call ourselves the worst club with the best members, because nobody wants to be in this world, but the people who are absolutely incredible. And you mentioned superheroes. There's superheroes I'm meeting and having meetings with, and Zoom calls and support groups on a daily basis. The people that, are strong and going through infertility really are true superheroes, and they are the best people I've ever met.
You mentioned that 1 in 6 couples are going through infertility. Why is the rate so high nowadays? Is it because people are starting families later in life? Is it something in our environment? With the medical professionals that you speak to, what is their reasoning?
Mm-hmm. It's all of the above, to be honest with you. Obviously I'm not a medical professional, but I've talked to hundreds of experts over the last 5 years since I've been immersed in this world. There's a lot of environmental factors. There's waiting, people are putting off having babies to focus on careers. And as I now know, which I didn't know at the time, there's kind of that spot when you turn about 35 as a woman that your egg quality really gets diminished. Women are born with all the eggs they will ever have, and sperm is regenerated. So that, that's why you don't see, men who are older are more easily able to have babies. But I think it's that, there's a lot of reasons behind the scenes. And, I feel like the number is just going to keep getting more and more people in the population are going to have to go through this. So that's why, I've created all these resources, because this isn't getting any better. It's only going to get worse. And I want people coming after me to have resources that I didn't have, and to have things like this community of Fertility Rally or the podcast they can listen to, or they can go to a support group online, or they can go to an event and meet people who are going through it too. I just want it to suck less for them.
Allie, where can people learn more about you and to follow all of your amazing work in the IVF community?
So if anybody wants to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Infertile AF Stories on Instagram. The podcast is called Infertile AF, and it's on all the platforms. It's, totally free, like every podcast is. And then the book, I'll hold it up again. It's called Work of Art. It's self-published, so you can find it on my website, which is infertileafgroup.com. We have personalized versions. I'll write you a little note. You can tell me what you want me to write, or non-personalized. People have been buying these as gifts for friends that have gone through IVF. We have clinics buying them in bulk to give to their patients as like graduation gifts, which has been really cool. So, just trying to put a little more love out into the world in this really, really dark, space of the world and dark area.
Allie, and you are so full of love. Thank you for coming on here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Your New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo. We'll see you back here next week.